a jumble amount of thoughts in my mind as to how to come at this text, and so bear with me as I take us through it, and I really trust that the Spirit's going to lead me to have some flow this morning. But in case you're just joining us for the first time, visitors, welcome. Ecclesiastes is where we are at in our Bible, so I just invite you to open up and look at the text for yourself as well. If you have that in book or app form, please do that to chapter 2. The teacher here, the writer, by the way, there's enough theology, I think, in some of those songs we sang this morning that pretty much sums up what I have to say. If you were here on time, we would have sung the song, I Will Exalt. And in there it says, without God's presence, there is no meaning. Well, we're here today to talk about meaning and meaninglessness, actually. And when we think about without God's presence, there is no meaning. But yet we ascribe, or we try to ascribe, to all kinds of different ways to find meaning in our lives. But is God's presence the one where we ultimately land on all the time? And then the other theological truth that I just love from one of the songs is, it's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise. It's not how great or not great our job is, or our work is, or our families are, but it's just the simple gift of breath coming from God, so we pour out our praise. So, I don't know, I wanted to share that. That's kind of underlining this whole message, I think, in a way. The teacher wants us to know that we humans, and you're going to hear this every week, are made for eternity. Every week that we preach through Ecclesiastes, we're going to stress that life goes beyond what is under the sun. And something inside us that says the world is not as it should be, that something is broken. Somehow things need to be set right. I really believe that thought is planted in each of us by God. Ecclesiastes 3:11 says, He has put eternity into man's heart. And so we are made for life beyond the sun, and I think that's part of the tension in our lives when we look at the world and we think, gosh, there's got to be some way to restore this. We even feel it in our bones, but so often we deny through just how we live that this is possible, that there in fact is life beyond the sun, and we get so wrapped up in this world and what we see now. I know I do. And I sense that some of us have sat through a couple Sundays of Ecclesiastes, if you've been with us, and we're missing this point that, you know, we can focus so much over the despair of the meaninglessness of it all, vanity of vanities, as the preacher writes. I mean, naturally, we can get hung up on what the teacher is saying about, you know, all of our efforts in this world being meaningless. But it's life to come after what we see now. That point is meant to override whatever sort of momentary grief you have about the fragility and the futility of your life on earth here as you know it. So I think this is crucial. I think if we read this book and turn up with just life and work and wisdom and pleasure being meaningless as the main point, we've severely misunderstood. And a question I asked myself this week was, you know, like, if that's all it is, like, does a loving God set his people up for a pointless existence? Does a loving God set his people up for a pointless existence, or is there something more for us to get here? So today I want to talk about meaninglessness and finish with a short gospel presentation, because there has to be a message of hope in here. And there's two really important theological points that are kind of imperative to the good news for us in this text, and we're going to build to that. But we don't learn and grow from just the happy, fun, candy stuff. The deep, meaty, hard stuff is actually what's going to save you. And a lot of us today could benefit this week from a brother or sister maybe having a a hard conversation. Maybe they could be so bold and not just try to be a people pleaser, but rather because of a longing for the safety of our souls, call us out on our stuff. Fluffy small talk will not grow you deeper in relationship with anyone, and most importantly, it's not going to fool God by trying to stay fluffy and on the surface. But that's a message for another Sunday. But just know, amidst this discussion on meaninglessness and futility of work in particular, that there's ways that we work to seek to give pleasure and meaning to our lives. I want us to really hold on, as there is an important gospel message at the end, and it is a message of hope for our joy. And I think, so this is Ecclesiastes, and this is for us right here today, Worcester Church. I want to talk about meaninglessness because we live in a time where we have so much choice. We have so many opportunities. Especially this time of year, like, how do you guys decide what activity to take part in today after the service, right? Like, we could go up the mountain, we go biking, we could go, there's even a guy I met who's like a unicycler. Like, there is a wealth of things for, able-bodied people to do. And even if you're not able-bodied, they have all kinds of amazing innovations for you to get down the mountain. It's just really incredible. And so we have all these opportunities, and we have huge expectations of what life should be able to deliver to us because of our progress and our lifestyles and the peace that we get to enjoy. But yet we experience so much frustration and confusion towards meaning, purposes in life. A summary I read of just this book of Ecclesiastes, as well as this text, is Ecclesiastes, and this is kind of a launch pad for us. Ecclesiastes is the futility of the pursuit of meaning apart from God. The futility of the pursuit of meaning apart from God. And we're going to speak to some evidence for this. Talking about meaning in terms of having a goal, Ravi Zacharias says, if you don't have a goal, you don't know what distracts you from it. If you don't know where you're headed, you will never really know if you are moving in the wrong direction. And how many people are just booking it through life right now, blindfolded in their quest for meaning, just taking in whatever feels right, whatever word of the day came across their Facebook feed, or whatever the social group they find themselves surrounded with is doing. It's critical for us to know our calling so we know what to say yes to and what to say no to. Habits we ought to indulge in and habits we ought to avoid. What we ought to speak and what we ought not to speak. Places we ought to go and places we ought not to go. It's critical to know any pursuit of meaning is and will be, this is the Christian worldview, futile if it is apart from God. And many of you have incredible experiential testimonies to back this up. Last week, Pastor John highlighted we attempted to fill ourselves with stuff to satisfy our deepest desires. We constantly attempt to trade what time we have for things that will bring us meaning and happiness, a fullness of life mentality. We constantly attempt to trade what time we have for things that will bring us meaning and happiness. Experimenting with everything and anything under the sun, testing to see if there is any value in pleasure and the pursuit of pleasure, and if we don't find it, we choose something different, we move on. King Solomon has one-upped everyone. You and I, even in Whistler, we got some big shots in this town. Solomon has one-upped them in terms of his wealth, in terms of his success, in terms of his power, his wisdom, his uninhibited sexuality. Like Nike probably got their slogan, just do it, from this guy Solomon. Like he took that challenge as far as it could go. And now So he's literally took that challenge as far as it could go. Just do it, and he's gone out and done it. But he's done it with wisdom. You don't attain, you don't acquire, you don't toil. He pretty much owned the earth at the time. You don't get there by just being dumb. He was full of wisdom, and now he's writing this letter to tell us that it's all in vain. And in the end, you're going to die, and no one is going to remember you. This is the wake-up call of a very wise man who has lived in the world and understood how the world works and how to thrive in it. See, this is the heavy, meaty stuff. It's good, though. And so the futility of meaning in our work, that's where we are in this text. I invite you to look at verse 18 and 19. I hated all my toil in which I toil under the sun, seeing that I must leave it to the man who will come after me. And who knows whether he will be wise or a fool? Yet he will be master of all for which I toiled and used my wisdom under the sun. This also is vanity. Is he saying here that the nature of work is meaningless? See, Solomon, as I said, didn't just inherit his wealth or his success. No, he did work for it. He worked hard and he worked diligently. The Hebrew word amal in Hebrew is for toil is to labor. It takes a lot of effort to acquire things, right? Whether it be a mental effort or physical effort, it's difficult work. Acquiring stuff is no easy task. And Solomon has gained many things through his own efforts over his lifetime. And here lies the futility. Solomon has been wise, he's been wealthy, and he's looking at his sons. His idiot sons, as I've heard them described, knowing that they will mess it up. And you can go, history tells us that they do. Solomon's kingdom crumbles after his death. His united kingdom would break apart into a north and south kingdom. His sons just didn't possess what Solomon possessed, and he foresaw this, and he calls it vanity. How unfortunate. We humans, male and female, are made for eternity, life beyond what is under the sun, and it is not our work that drives us to tasting and seeing what life beyond the sun will be like. It is not our legacy we leave behind, and before that, it's not our self-indulgence that we get to enjoy that's going to give us this fullness of life that we're after. Solomon's search reveals that everything, we got a number of weeks to go through the rest of this book. Solomon's search reveals that everything is like chasing the wind. Everything that we trade time for is like a vapor. So I want to talk about meaninglessness because there's this provocative quote I heard a couple of years ago, and I myself was one who chased a lot of pleasure before I knew God, and I can attest to this being true. Writer G.K. Chesterton says, meaninglessness does not come from being weary of pain. Meaninglessness comes from being weary of pleasure. Meaninglessness does not come from being weary of pain. Meaninglessness, in a greater sense of the word, comes from being weary of pleasure. Solomon, King Solomon, author of achievement, accomplished it, done it. What are you chasing to own? He's there saying, no, I got 1,000 times more. He has dreamt big, and he's come to realize all of his dreams. And now he's got to leave it all to his sons. In verse 23, we see that this reality just leaves him full of sorrow. He says, what has a man from all the toil and striving of heart with which he toils beneath the sun? For all his days are full of sorrow, and his work is a vexation. His work is a frustration. It's a worry to him. Even in the night, his heart does not rest. This is vanity. Work is a vexation. It's frustrating. We demand to be paid because we work. We demand to expect things from society, from this world, to give to us because we're working hard. But he's saying it's not going to matter in the end. Even in the night, some of us are working so hard that we can't rest. Work, work, work. restlessness. What's it all for? You know, there are plenty of prominent figures throughout our recent history who have had huge dreams and they've accomplished and beyond what they set out to do. All the dreams they could have had and beyond are accomplished, and they're left sucking out all the marrow of life at a young age, and they're left with the bones, and they just can't stand it. You heard of the 27 Club? It's just, Kurt Cobain kind of created this. Didn't create it. He sort of made this stamp. Guys like Jim Morrison of the Doors or Jimi Hendrix, Kurt Cobain, all passed away at the age of 27 through suicide. These guys are living a lifestyle that makes, our little, fancy lives seem pretty small. Do you think a new cell phone release or, an amazing vacation would have numbed the pain of Kurt Cobain before he killed himself? I don't think so. There's a song that came to mind this week as I'm thinking about this and thinking about, artists who have taken their lives. One is Chester Bennington of Linkin Park. And about probably 10 years ago, before he killed himself, he wrote this song called In the End. I'm going to read the lyrics to you. It starts with one thing. I don't know why. It doesn't even matter how hard you try. Keep that in mind. I designed this rhyme to explain in due time all I know. Time is a valuable thing. Watch it fly by as the pendulum swings. Watch it count down to the end of the day. The clock ticks life away. It's so unreal. Where do we go? I didn't look out below. I watched the time go right out the window. Trying to hold on, but you didn't even know. Wasted it all just to watch you go. I kept everything inside, and even though I tried, it all fell apart. What it meant to me will eventually be a memory of a time when I tried so hard and got so far. But in the end, it doesn't even matter. I had to fall to lose it all, but in the end, it doesn't even matter. I toiled, I achieved. What's it all for in the end anyway? The guy that wrote these lyrics, the front man of the band, committed suicide about 2 years ago after a severe battle with depression. Meaninglessness can be discovered an even deeper reality, I think, when we realize that the big dreams that we had don't deliver. So if it's not our work that gets us to experience fullness of life, eternity as we're talking about, if it's not our pleasures that get us to taste a bit of life beyond what we see today, then we should be asking, well, what does? I'm building to that. Maybe it's better to just not think about eternity, right? Maybe it's better to numb ourselves. But there is an obstacle that we all face and we're running towards, and it's namely death. And we've been talking about death, and we will continue to talk about death here as we go through this book. And I think thinking about death, could this make us better as a people if we were more open to talking about death in just a matter-of-fact, real way? Could this make us see our relationships to those around us differently? Could thinking about death and our own mortality make us spend our time and our energy and our money differently than we currently do? I realize that I'm probably in peak performance of my life right now. I'm strong. I just PR'd my squat by 10 kilos this week, right, Darcy? But in the same breath, I realize that I am fragile, that my life is fragile, and I could go tomorrow just like any one of you could. It's humbling to think about. But to the average person, does considering death give you a greater sense of meaning for your life or a greater sense of meaninglessness for your life? The secular worldview that ascribes to believing that life only exists under the sun, well, they're going to end up in the same despairing reality every time. Solomon's trying to tell us the secular world will continue to prove Ecclesiastes right every time. Death comes, and that's it. There's no hope beyond the grave. I want to keep going through our text. There's a change of tune that is a bit confusing in verse 24. All of a sudden, Solomon writes, "There is nothing better for a person than that he should eat and drink and find enjoyment in his toil." Cheers. "This also I saw is from the hand of God, for apart from him, who can eat or who can have enjoyment?" I find it helpful if we read this verse kind of backwards or in reverse order. Remember, futility of meaning apart. There is futility when we're looking for meaning apart from God. And here he's saying, for apart from God, who can eat or who can have enjoyment? Who can find meaning? If we see everything as a gift from the hand of God, if he is in control, it gives us a different perspective. And our launch pad to go from here is from Matt Chandler with sort of a definition coming out of this this verse. He says, and this is going to help us understand this verse, there is nothing intrinsic, there is nothing essential within the soul of man that will let him, for a long period of time, enjoy any of his work, any of his food, any of his toil. There is nothing essential within you or within you or I that can ultimately and everlastingly give us enjoyment. Not any job that you take and not any amazing food that you get to experience. And what is this saying? This is saying that you are not God. That God is God. That God's in control. That you are not in control. Now, what evidence do we have for this? Well, you and I, we have this idea of eternity in our hearts, and we keep trying to fill it and satisfy ourselves with temporary things. I have to share this example of going to the dealership. I have a 3-year-old car. I take it to the dealership because it's still under warranty to get serviced. And you walk in there, and the place is just spotless. You have a beautiful showroom with the most expensive models of cars on the showroom, fully loaded with all the bells and whistles, so that you know how far you can go with that model, right? And here I come in, dirtbag, with my 3-year-old car, hand him the keys. It's getting scratched up, it's dusty, there's baby milk stains on the seat. Boy, those new cars smell pretty. Anyone seen that new Aladdin movie recently? The new Aladdin? Or everyone's familiar with Aladdin? I would expect most of you. My wife's not, so I have to ask. But there's the scene where Aladdin and the monkey are in the Cave of Wonders, and the monkey just can't help himself. He's not supposed to touch any treasure except the lamp. And he goes for this ruby, and that face is us. This is what sales and marketing have done to us. That's me in the Audi dealership, just drooling, right? This wave of excitement comes over us. All the bells and whistles, the 360-degree cameras, the interior lighting, the smell. My car has grown predictable and boring. I got it with 10,000 kilometers on it. It was like a new car, and it's grown predictable and boring. And if I had to spend days in that dealership, I would be driving out with a new car. They would convince me. It's like a hypnosis. And any other thing we would buy has the same effect. The nature of everything changes over time. Our relationship to our stuff or anything we buy changes over time. Our relationship to work changes over time. There is nothing inside of us that's going to allow us constant enjoyment forever. That's the point here. There's a brokenness. Even relationships with people requires work to sustain. Relationships require work. They require some to be fought for, right? Everything changes and nothing satisfies forever. Like when my wife and I got married, we were in the honeymoon stage. We had a honeymoon. And, leading up to our marriage, I think it was, when we came up with this term, the honey life, we wanted to not give in to, the fading away of just the enjoyment and the wonder and just the awesomeness of a new marriage and all the stuff that goes with that and your feelings towards one another. But guess what? We're still living the honey life, but it might not look and feel exactly like we thought it would. But we're going to fight for it, and we're going to contend for it. We want to sustain. We want to live this honey life, and we're going to talk. And I hope that we're still talking about this word honey life in years to come. But I'll tell you, it's not. What like you who are maybe in a dating relationship and you have this idea of what that honey life, the honeymoon stage is, know that it changes, right? You who are married for how many years? What's the honey life look for you? Is it the same as the honeymoon stage? It keeps changing. So we have to fight for the honey life. That's, if you're taking notes, you can write that down. Brokenness. Nothing of enjoyment will be lasting forever. The logic for this is this, and if you don't have a top 5 scripture verse, you can add this to it. Proverbs 25:16 says, if you find honey, just enough, just eat just enough, too much of it, and you will vomit. If you find honey, eat just enough, too much of it, and you will vomit. Any pleasure, however good, if not kept in balance, will distort reality or it will destroy appetite. We cannot go endlessly with any pleasure. Too much of it will have diminishing returns. There is a futility in meaning with our stuff. There's a futility of seeking meaning in relationships alone. There is a futility of seeking meaning in what we do alone. Is there an answer to this brokenness to discover a meaning that lasts? Well, part of the answer, remember this is meaty, this is challenging, part of the answer to breaking through this brokenness is that this life, your life, has never been nor will ever be about you. You are not the center, you are not central, and you'll never be. The degree to which you think your life is all about you actually determines how much freedom you really enjoy versus how much of a slave you will be to your pursuits. And you guys, people can leave. I understand. That's hard. You are not the center. You are not central, and you never will be. Man, that's hard. When it's all about you, you are a slave to unmet expectations. You demand much of other people. You demand much of the world. You demand much of your workplace to give and give and give and sustain you for, a period of time until that runs out, and then you need more. This is about Christ and what he has done on the cross. Verse 26. For to the one who pleases him, God has given wisdom and knowledge and joy. So the big theological question coming out of that is, well, what pleases God? And the Sunday school answer is faith. Faith pleases God. Faith, believing that God is here. Believing that God's presence is all we need. It's all I want. It's all I seek. And without it, there's no meaning. Believing that everything comes from his hands, even sorrow. thinking about the devil and how he prowls around. You know, he's not, I don't play chess, but I understand that a bishop can do whatever he wants. The devil can't do whatever he wants. He's a pawn. He's allowed to do what God allows him to do. Everything comes from God's hands, and it's not by wrath, but it's by mercy and love. Now that sounds backwards. Everything comes from God's hands. Everything is a gift, even sorrow. But man, your attitude determines your latitude on that one. Jesus says, I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, though he die, yet shall he live. And everyone who lives and believes in me shall never die. Do you believe this? If you do, God is well pleased with you. And to the one who pleases him, God has given wisdom and knowledge and joy. You know what helps when you're going through a rough time? Wisdom and knowledge and joy. What I appreciate about Ecclesiastes as I get to know it more intimately is just the teacher's wisdom in his observation of how the world works. And his faith that goes beyond just what he sees. Like an evil person who lives long, right? This doesn't last forever. Or a righteous person, a good godly person who experiences terrible hardship. This doesn't last forever. This is the wisdom that Solomon is trying to pass on to us. So coming back to work, we are working a majority of our lives for gain, and it will all be lost when we die. For those of us that work hard, is the gain we have looked at as fruit of our labors or as a gift from God? Works of ourselves or gifts from God bestowed on us as part of his purposes? Who at the end of the day is really in control? And beyond our physical labor, there's a ton of stress we carry on finding meaning in life and striving intellectually and emotionally. We face so many situations that even in the night, we can't find rest. Who's been stressed out at night and has had a hard time sleeping? I'm not saying all the time, I'm saying it's happened. We are not the one who is in control, and we are not entitled to anything. 2019, we are not entitled to anything. We are not entitled to anything. That is hard. But if things are recognized as gifts, we don't drive ourselves crazy over toiling day and night. So what keeps you up in the night? Verse 26 again, For to the one who pleases him, God has given wisdom and knowledge and joy. But to the sinner he has given the business of gathering and collecting, only to give to one who pleases God. This also is vanity and a striving after the wind. See, on the surface, that looks odd. I don't know many Christians who are just, coming into these huge inheritances from wealthy people who are just like, here you go. But the same sense, I think of a verse like, blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. And then I think about the Sermon on the Mount. And Jesus has a lot of backwards things to say, backwards to this world at least. Matthew 6, 25 to 33. This is going to help me close. Jesus is saying, Therefore I tell you, do not be anxious about your life, what you will eat or what you will drink, nor about your body, what you will put on. Is not life more than food and the body more than clothing? Look at the birds of the air. There's so many birds out these days. It's just beautiful standing outside and hearing them. They neither sow nor reap nor gather into barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not of more value than they? And which of you, by being anxious, can add a single hour to his span of life? And why are you anxious about clothing? Consider the lilies of the field, how they grow. They neither toil nor spin, yet I tell you, even Solomon, our boy, in all his glory, was not arrayed like one of these. But if God so clothes the grass of the field, which today is alive and tomorrow is thrown into the oven, will he not much more clothe you, O you of little faith? There's our word. Therefore, do not be anxious, saying, what shall we eat? Or what shall we drink? Or what shall we wear? Or how can I work to get all those things? For the Gentiles seek after all these things, and your heavenly Father knows that you need them all. He knows. But seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added unto you. I think that's what verse 26 is saying. So why are we worrying and filled with anxiety over the things we have and are working so hard for? This is not just a problem for the rich. People without material gain are concerned about what everyone else is going on as well. It's a universal struggle. I think it's not a coincidence that Jesus talks about this in his Sermon on the Mount, and that very wise man Solomon addresses our anxieties. And it comes down to an issue of worship. We have things competing for our affections constantly, and we got one life to live and only so much time. So we can accept Scripture or rail against it, and I don't know a third option. But hopefully we can think a little bit about death coming for us individually, and we can ask ourselves, do we really believe that God is here? Do we really believe that good gifts that we enjoy come from his hands, and we're ready to humble ourselves in coming to that realization? What is our pursuit? What is our pursuit as a church, as a church family here in Whistler? Is it stuff? Is it a building? Or is it a building with God attached to it? Is it stuff with God attached to it? So this week I ask you to carve out some time. I invite you to take a break from the pursuit of God because he is with you. I invite you to rest in him. To look at creation as a gift. To look at your job as a gift. To look at your health as healthy as you might be or as sick as you might be. Every breath is a gift. Every breath, so we pour out our praise. Let's pray. God, this is hard. But we proclaim, we've experienced this. Without you in our pursuit of meaning, our pursuit comes up short. It comes up empty, and we are left wanting. God, without your love, we can't define love. Without you, we can't define meaning for our lives. And so I ask, God, that your will be done in the lives of those running from God. I ask that your will be done for those who are putting their money and their labor on a bet that they can somehow find fullness of life outside of you. Whatever it takes, Lord, your will be done. And when the hard times come, Lord, may your name not be cursed, but rather may we see sorrow and hardship as part of your grace and mercy for us. May we see that. And God, I pray that we would believe more deeply. Help me to believe more deeply that as we make more of you and less of ourselves, that you promise, you will increase our joy. You promise you will increase our wisdom and knowledge. So let us not dwell on what personal legacies that we can leave behind, but rather turn our focus to bringing glory to your name day in and day out. In all that we do, I pray. Amen.
So doesn't even matter. I had to fall to lose it all. But in the end, it doesn't even matter. I tried so hard and got so far. But in the end, it doesn't even matter. I had to fall to lose it all. But in the end, it doesn't even matter. It's hard to all I know. So watch you go. I tried so hard and got so far. But in the end, it doesn't even matter. I had to fall to lose it all. But in the end, it doesn't even